So, let me tell you about the day I stopped believing everything my species thought we knew about warfare, biology, and the very concept of when something should just have the decency to die. My name is Vorthan. No, I do not care if you can pronounce it. I am a tactical observer for the Galactic Council, which is basically a fancy way of saying I get paid to watch other species fight wars and file reports that no one reads. For 300 cycles, I have watched battles across 47 systems. And I have seen empires fall. I have witnessed last stands that would make your sensory organs weep. I thought, quite foolishly as it turns out, that I had seen everything. Then I met the humans. More specifically, then I met Sergeant Jake Holloway, and my entire understanding of reality decided to pack its bags and go on vacation. It started on a planet called Draxus 9, in a miserable ball of red sand and volcanic activity that nobody wanted but everybody was fighting over because it sat on a strategic hyperspace lane. The Kryn Dominion had decided this rock was worth dying for. The human forces disagreed. I was there to observe and document because apparently the Council wanted to see how these new species, these humans, handled real combat. The briefing I received about humans was, let us say, underwhelming. Bipedal mammals from a death world, moderate physical capabilities, notable for pack bonding and irrational persistence. That last part should have been in bigger font, maybe with flashing lights. Perhaps an alarm. I was embedded with the Kryn forces, observing from their command post. The Kryn are professional soldiers, scaled and efficient, with centuries of military doctrine. They outnumbered the human contingent 3-1. They had better weapons, better armor, better everything. This was supposed to be a quick operation. Secure the valley, eliminate the human garrison, move on. The human base was a collection of prefabricated structures huddled in a canyon, maybe 200 soldiers total. The Kryn general, a scarred veteran named Thex, was already planning his victory speech. They will break within the first assault, Thex told me, his tail swishing with confidence. Mammals always do. Too emotional. Too fragile. I nodded, made notes, and prepared to watch another predictable battle. Oh, how wrong we were. How spectacularly, impossibly wrong. The attack began at dawn. Kryn artillery hammered the human positions, turning the prefab structures into twisted metal. The shelling went on for 2 hours. Nothing could survive that bombardment. Nothing should have survived. I watched the readouts, saw the temperatures in that valley spike high enough to melt steel, and I started composing the report in my head. Human resistance eliminated in opening barrage. Expected outcome. Then the shelling stopped, and the Kryn ground forces advanced. That is when the shooting started. The humans were still there, still alive, still fighting. They came boiling out of bunkers and collapsed buildings like angry insects from a disturbed nest, and they were absolutely furious about being shelled for 2 hours. Who knew mammals could hold grudges so efficiently? I watched through the observation screens as human soldiers, these supposedly fragile creatures, engaged in firefights with Kryn troops who outweighed them by 50 kilograms. The humans did not fight like any species I had documented. They did not fall back to defensible positions. They did not attempt to preserve their forces. They attacked. They actually attacked, while outnumbered, while outgunned, while their base was still on fire around them. This is illogical, I muttered, making frantic notes. Thex looked concerned for the first time. They should be retreating. Why are they advancing? Because, as I would learn, humans do not read the manual on how they are supposed to behave. The fighting was brutal. The Kryn were trained, disciplined, and professional. The humans were none of these things. They were creative, unpredictable, and apparently operating on spite and caffeine. I watched one human soldier, yes, it was Holloway, though I did not know his name yet, use a damaged hover vehicle as a mobile barricade, pushing it forward while his squad advanced behind it, firing the entire time. The Kryn tried to flank them. Holloway, without any apparent concern for military doctrine or his own survival, grabbed what looked like an explosive charge, sprinted directly at the flanking force, and threw it into their midst. The explosion sent Kryn's soldiers flying. Holloway did not even slow down. He just kept running, shooting, and apparently having the time of his life. "These creatures are insane," Thex said, and I had to agree. The battle raged for 6 hours. 6 hours of humans refusing to do what they were supposed to do, which was die. They held that valley through sheer stubbornness and what I can only describe as weaponized audacity. The Kryn finally fell back to regroup, and I transmitted my initial report. Human forces demonstrate unexpected resilience and aggression. The casualties significant, but morale remains high. Further observation required. What I should have written was, "Send help." These mammals are terrifying. The next assault came 3 days later. The Kryn had reinforced, brought up heavier weapons, and were determined to end this embarrassment. I was still with them, still documenting, still trying to understand what I was seeing. The humans had reinforced too, somehow getting supplies through the Kryn blockade. Do not ask me how. Every time I thought I understood human capabilities, they did something else impossible. The second battle made the first one look like a friendly disagreement. The Kryn came in with armor support, heavy walkers that could punch through fortifications. The humans responded with shoulder-fired missiles, improvised explosives, and in one memorable case, a human soldier who somehow climbed onto a walker and started pulling panels off until he could drop grenades inside. That was Holloway again. I was starting to recognize his particular brand of crazy. He was, I noted, a sergeant. His squad followed him with the kind of loyalty that I had only seen in species with biological pack bonds. Humans, I was learning, formed these bonds with everyone. Their squad, their unit, their species. They pack-bonded with their weapons, for crying out loud. I watched Holloway pat his rifle like it was a pet. The fighting concentrated around a ridge that overlooked the main human position. Whoever held that ridge controlled the valley. The Kryn knew it. The humans knew it. It became the focal point of everything. Holloway's squad was assigned to hold the ridge. 12 humans against repeated Kryn assaults. I watched through drone feeds, documenting what I was certain would be their last stand. They held for 2 days. 2 days of constant attacks, no sleep, limited supplies, and these mammals just kept fighting. They took casualties. They ran out of ammunition and started using Kryn weapons. They ran out of those and started throwing rocks, actual rocks. One human, a woman named Thompson, killed a Kryn soldier with a rock to the head and then used his weapon against his own squad. This is not normal behavior, I kept repeating into my recorder. This level of persistence is not documented in any species profile. Fitz was no longer confident. He was angry and frustrated and possibly beginning to fear these strange mammals who would not stop. On the second night of the ridge defense, the Kryn launched what was supposed to be the final assault. Everything they had, all at once. Overwhelming force. The humans could not possibly hold. That is when Holloway got shot. I saw it happen through the drone feed. A Kryn energy weapon, direct hit to his chest. The impact threw him backwards. His armor sparked and melted. He went down hard and did not move. His squad was screaming on the comms. Human voices filled with grief and rage, which I was learning was a very bad combination when it came to this species. They fought even harder, if such a thing was possible, driving back the Kryn assault through sheer fury. But Holloway was dead. I saw the hit. I saw him fall. I marked his status as killed in action in my report, added him to the casualty list, and felt something I had not expected to feel. Regret. Sadness. This insane human who fought like a creature possessed had earned my respect, and now he was gone. The Kryn pulled back. They had taken too many casualties. Thex was already planning the next assault, but I could see doubt in his eyes. These humans were costing too much. They were supposed to be easy. The human forces held a brief memorial service for their fallen. I monitored the communications, learning about human funeral customs. They spoke about Holloway with affection and grief. They talked about his courage, his humor, his dedication to his squad. It was touching in a way I did not expect. Then they loaded his body into a transport with the other casualties and continued fighting because, of course, they did. The next Kryn assault came at dawn, because military commanders apparently never get tired of dawn attacks. This one was different. The Kryn brought incendiary weapons, planning to burn the humans out of their positions. If explosives and energy weapons would not work, fire would. They were not wrong. The fire was effective, terrifyingly effective. The human positions were engulfed in flames hot enough to melt rock. I watched the temperature readings climb beyond anything a biological organism could survive. The screams on the human comms were horrible to hear. The Kryn advanced through the burning hell they had created, and for the first time the human lines broke. They fell back, dragging wounded, coughing from smoke inhalation, their armor scorched and melted. It looked like the end. Thex was triumphant. Finally they break. The human retreat was orderly but desperate. They fell back to their secondary positions, deeper in the valley. The Kryn followed, pressing the advantage, determined to end this once and for all. That is when the explosions started. The humans had mined the entire approach. Booby-trapped everything. The advancing Kryn walked into a killing field of improvised explosives that turned their triumphant advance into a panicked retreat. The humans, even while falling back, even while burned and desperate, had prepared one more surprise. They planned this, I said, amazed. They planned their own retreat and turned it into a trap. X was no longer speaking. He was just staring at the casualty reports with what I recognized as shock. The battle stalemated after that. The Kryn could not advance through the mines. The humans could not push forward through the burned zones. Both sides dug in, and I settled in for what looked like a prolonged siege. That is when things got really weird. 3 days after the fire attack, 3 days after I had personally documented his death, Sergeant Jake Holloway walked into the human command post and asked for coffee. I know this because I was monitoring all human communications. I heard the commotion, heard someone scream, heard a lot of very creative human profanity. Then I heard a voice I recognized, slightly hoarse but definitely alive, say, "What? What is everyone freaking out about?" I pulled up the security feed from inside the human base. There he was, Holloway, alive, walking, talking. His chest was bandaged. He looked like he had been through a fire, which he had, but he was absolutely, impossibly alive. I rewound my footage from 3 days ago, watched the shot that killed him again. The energy weapon hit. The impact. The fall. He was dead. He had to be dead. Nothing survives that kind of shot. Nothing. But there he was, drinking coffee and asking where his rifle was because apparently, even death was not going to separate this human from his favorite weapon. I transmitted an urgent message to my superiors. Previous casualty report requires correction. Sergeant Holloway's status alive. Explanation unknown. Request clarification on human biological resilience parameters because nothing in my database covers this. The response I got back was essentially, "Are you sure you are observing correctly?" Yes, I was sure. I was watching a dead man drink coffee and complain about the quality of the medical bay. Holloway was not cleared for duty. The human doctors were adamant. He had been clinically dead for 3 minutes. 3 minutes without oxygen to his brain. His heart had stopped. They had resuscitated him, treated severe burns, and were amazed he was alive, much less walking around. Holloway's response was, and I quote, "Yeah, but I feel fine now. Can I have my gun back?" The human doctors said no. Holloway needed rest, observation, time to recover. This was sensible. This was logical. This was what any reasonable species would require. Holloway, it turns out, was not interested in being reasonable. That night he snuck out of the medical bay, retrieved his rifle, and reported to his squad's position on the defensive line. His squad, upon seeing their supposedly dead sergeant appear out of the darkness, nearly shot him. Then they hugged him. Then they yelled at him. Then they gave him coffee and asked if he was really okay. Human emotional responses are exhausting to catalog. "I am fine," Holloway told them. "Got shot, got better. Let us get back to work." I was listening to all of this with my sensory organs wide open in shock. This was not how biology worked. This was not how anything worked. But humans, I was learning, did not care much about how things were supposed to work. The Kryn launched another assault the next day, because Thex was nothing if not persistent. This attack was different, smarter. They had studied human tactics, adapted their approach, and came in with a coordinated strike designed to exploit human weaknesses. It almost worked. The Kryn breached the outer defenses, pushed into the human positions, and for a terrible moment, it looked like the end for the garrison. The fighting was close quarters, brutal and chaotic. Holloway's squad was in the thick of it, fighting off Kryn soldiers in trenches that had become close-range death traps. I watched through multiple feeds, trying to track the action, and I saw Holloway do something I still have trouble believing. A Kryn grenade landed in the trench. Holloway saw it, had maybe 2 seconds to react, and instead of diving for cover like any sane being, he jumped on it. He jumped on the grenade, deliberately, to shield his squad from the blast. The explosion should have killed him, should have torn him apart. I recorded his death for the second time, marked him as killed in action again, and started updating my casualty reports. His squad was screaming. The humans were calling for medics. I was preparing the documentation for my report about how even the most resilient species has limits. Then Holloway stood up. He stood up from a grenade blast that he had jumped on with his own body. His armor was shredded. He was bleeding from multiple wounds. But he was standing, he was conscious, and he was, somehow, still shooting at Kryn soldiers. "Medic," he called out, his voice steady despite the fact that he should be dead. "I am going to need a medic after we clear this position." After they cleared the position. This human had just used his body as a grenade suppressor and was planning his medical treatment around completing the mission first. I stopped recording, stopped making notes. Just watched in stunned silence as Holloway continued fighting, his squad rallying around him with the kind of ferocious determination that made the Kryn assault falter and then break. The humans held. Again, impossibly. When the fighting stopped, I watched the medics work on Holloway. Shrapnel wounds across his back and legs, burns, concussion, internal bleeding. The list of injuries was extensive enough that any reasonable being would be dead or comatose. Holloway was arguing with the doctor about whether he needed surgery right away or if it could wait until after the next expected attack. The doctor, a grizzled human named Fletcher, had apparently dealt with Holloway before. "You are going into surgery now, Sergeant, or I will sedate you and drag you there myself." "That seems aggressive," Holloway replied, then passed out from blood loss. They operated on him in a field hospital while Kryn artillery started shelling the valley again. I listened to the surgical teamwork, their calm professionalism while explosions shook the building. They pulled out 17 pieces of shrapnel, repaired internal damage, and patched him back together. "He will live," Dr. Fletcher announced after 8 hours of surgery. "But he is done fighting. At least for this deployment. Maybe forever. His body has taken too much damage." I filed this report with a sense of relief. Holloway had survived again, against all probability, but at least now he would be evacuated. Sent somewhere safe. His war was over. I should have known better. 2 days later, while still recovering from surgery, while supposedly under strict medical supervision, Holloway disappeared from the medical facility. Where did he go? Back to his squad. Back to the defensive line. Back to fighting. The human command structure had what I can only describe as a collective breakdown. Orders were issued. Holloway was to report back to medical immediately. This was not a request. This was a direct command from a superior officer. Holloway's response, transmitted over open comms for everyone to hear, was simple. "Respectfully, sir, my squad needs me. I will report back when we are done here." The commander, a colonel named Hayes, tried several more times to order Holloway back. Each time, Holloway politely declined. His squad backed him up, saying they needed their sergeant and they would make sure he did not push himself too hard. This was mutiny by any military standard, a refusal of direct orders. But Hayes, after attempting to pull rank several more times, eventually gave up. "Fine, fine. Keep your insane sergeant. But if he dies out there, I am not explaining it to his family." "I will not die, sir," Holloway replied cheerfully. "I tried that twice already this week. Did not stick. Human humor is very dark sometimes." The Kryn assault came that afternoon. They had brought up their heaviest weapons, determined to end this once and for all. The bombardment was more intense than anything before. The entire valley shook with explosions. Monitoring equipment failed. Communication lines went down. It was total devastation. When the shelling finally stopped, I thought surely nothing could have survived. Surely this time, finally, the humans were done. The Kryn advanced in force, thousands of soldiers moving through the smoking ruins of what had been the human defensive positions. This was it. The end. I prepared my final report on the human garrison. The shooting started before the Kryn even reached the main positions. The humans were still there, still fighting, and they were very, very angry about being shelled. At the end, what followed was less a battle and more a brawl. Humans fighting from collapsed bunkers, ambushing from rubble, using destroyed vehicles as cover. They had no cohesive defensive line anymore, just scattered positions of soldiers who refused to quit. And in the middle of it all was Holloway, leading his squad in a fighting retreat through the ruins, making the Kryn pay for every meter of ground. I watched him through fragmentary feeds, appearing and disappearing in the smoke and fire. He had been shot, burned, and blown up multiple times in the last week. He should be dead several times over. But there he was, fighting with the kind of determination that made me question everything I knew about biological limits. The Kryn pushed deeper. The human perimeter contracted. It looked like the end. It had to be the end. Nothing could change this outcome. That is, when the human reinforcements arrived. 2 companies of human marines dropped from orbit in combat pods that screamed through the atmosphere like falling meteors. They hit the ground behind the Kryn lines and immediately attacked, catching the Dominion forces in a pincer. The battle turned into a rout. The Kryn, suddenly surrounded and facing enraged human soldiers on all sides, broke and ran. The siege was over. I watched the aftermath in a daze. The human casualties were enormous. The damage to their base was catastrophic. By any reasonable metric, they should have lost this battle days ago. But they won. Through stubbornness, through refusal to accept reality, through sheer bloody-minded determination, they won. And Holloway. He was sitting on a piece of rubble, drinking water and making jokes with his squad. His uniform was torn and bloody. He had bandages everywhere. But he was alive and he was smiling. I transmitted my final report to the council. It was not the clinical analysis I was supposed to provide. It was more of a confused rambling about human resilience and my complete inability to explain what I had witnessed. The response came back 3 days later. A new assignment. The council wanted more information about human military capabilities. I was to continue observing, this time embedded directly with human forces. They assigned me to Holloway's unit. Of course they did, because apparently my superiors have a sense of humor. When I arrived at the human base for my new assignment, Holloway was there to meet me. He was out of the medical bay, finally cleared for duty despite the protests of every doctor on the base. "So you are the observer who has been documenting all our fights," he said, looking me over with curiosity. "Hope we gave you something interesting to write about." Interesting. He called it interesting. This human had been shot, burned, and blown up. He had died twice by my count, possibly 3 times depending on definitions. He had violated direct orders, fought while critically injured, and somehow survived all of it. And he thought it was just interesting. Sergeant Holloway, I said carefully, I have been a tactical observer for 300 cycles. I have documented 47 different conflicts across multiple species. In all that time, I have never seen anything like what you and your soldiers did on Draxus 9. He grinned. Actually grinned. Stick with us, observer. That was just a warm-up. A warm-up. He called that nightmare a warm-up. That is when I knew my new assignment was going to be unlike anything I had ever experienced. I was not just observing humans anymore. I was trying to understand them, and understanding humans, I was learning, required abandoning everything you thought you knew about what was possible. But that is a story for part 2. For now, know this, I thought I had seen the full measure of human capability on Draxus 9. I thought Holloway's survival was the most impossible thing I would ever witness. I was wrong. So very, very wrong. Because what happened next made Draxus 9 look like a training exercise. My new assignment with the human forces started exactly 3 days after Draxus 9 was secured, which was apparently not enough time for anyone to properly heal from nearly dying multiple times, but humans do not seem to believe in concepts like proper recovery time. I reported to the human forward operating base on a station called Pinnacle Point, a massive orbital facility that served as the staging ground for operations in this sector. The station was chaos. Human Marines everywhere, equipment being loaded, ships coming and going. Everyone was preparing for something big. I found Holloway in the training bay, running combat drills with his squad. Running. This man had been in surgery 1 week ago, pulling shrapnel out of his spine, and now he was sprinting through obstacle courses like nothing had happened. Observer Vorthen, he called out when he saw me, not even breathing hard. Welcome to the team. You are just in time. We ship out in 6 hours. 6 hours. I had barely unpacked my observation equipment. Ship out to where? I asked, pulling out my recording devices. Classified, said a new voice behind me. I turned to find a human female, tall and scarred, with the insignia of a captain on her uniform. But since you are embedded with us now, suppose you will find out soon enough. I am Captain Rita Alvarez. I command the strike team Holloway's squad is attached to. She looked me over with the kind of assessment that reminded me why humans were such effective predators. Her eyes missed nothing. You watched the Draxus 9 operation, she said. It was not a question. I did. I documented everything. Good. Then you know what we are capable of. What you are about to see will make Draxus 9 look like a training exercise. She smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something terrible was about to happen and was looking forward to it. I should have requested a transfer right then. The briefing came 3 hours later. The entire strike team assembled in the operations room. 50 humans, all veterans, all carrying themselves with that peculiar human confidence that bordered on arrogance but was backed up by disturbing competence. Captain Alvarez brought up a holographic display. It showed a planet heavy with industrial development. This is Corvin Prime, the main manufacturing center for the Kryn Dominion in this sector. Intelligence indicates they are building a superweapon here, something that could shift the entire balance of power in the war. Murmurs ran through the assembled soldiers. I made notes, already calculating the odds of a successful assault on such a heavily defended target. The numbers were not encouraging. Our mission, Alvarez continued, is to infiltrate the planet, reach the manufacturing facility, and destroy the weapon before it becomes operational. This is a stealth operation. We go in quiet, do the job, get out before they know we were there. A stealth operation. 50 humans trying to sneak onto the most heavily guarded planet in the sector. This was insanity. Questions? Alvarez asked. Holloway raised his hand. What is the expected survival rate for this mission, Captain? Alvarez did not hesitate. Command estimates 30% of us will make it back. 30%. 7 out of 10 humans in this room would likely die. I waited for the protests, the objections, the very reasonable concerns about a suicide mission. Instead, the humans started checking their equipment and making jokes. Better odds than Draxus 9, someone called out. At least we get to ride in a ship this time instead of getting shelled for a week, another voice added. They were laughing. About a mission with a 70% casualty rate. They were actually laughing. Holloway caught my expression. Something wrong, observer? You are all going to die, I said flatly. The statistical probability of success is minimal at best. Yeah, probably, Holloway agreed cheerfully. But we are going to make one hell of a mess before we do. Besides, statistics never stopped us before. We loaded onto the transport ships 4 hours later. The flight to Corvin Prime would take 3 days through hyperspace. 3 days to prepare, to plan, to contemplate the mission ahead. I spent those 3 days interviewing the strike team members, trying to understand what made these humans volunteer for what was essentially certain death. The answers varied but contained common threads. A corporal named Davis told me, someone has to do it. Might as well be us. A specialist named Lee said, my family is back on Earth. If this weapon gets built, they are in danger. So yeah, I am going. A private named Torres simply stated Holloway is going. Where he goes, we go, and that last one came up repeatedly. These humans had pact-bonded with Holloway so strongly that they would follow him into hell itself. When I mentioned this to Holloway, he looked uncomfortable. It is not like that, he protested. They are professionals. They follow orders. They follow you, I corrected. There is a difference. He was quiet for a moment. Then I better make sure I lead them right. The human sense of responsibility is almost as terrifying as their stubbornness. We dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Corvin system and began the careful approach. Stealth ships running silent, trying to avoid the extensive sensor networks that protected the planet. For 2 days we drifted closer, and I had to admit the human pilots were very good. We avoided detection, slipped past patrol routes, and entered orbit without triggering any alarms. The insertion was done through high-altitude drops, each soldier in an individual pod, falling through the atmosphere towards the landing zone. I was strapped into my own pod, my recording equipment secured, preparing to document what would likely be my last mission as an observer. Nervous? Holloway asked over the comm system. His pod was right next to mine in the drop bay. I am a non-combatant observer documenting a suicide mission, I replied. What do you think? Fair point. He paused. Look, Vorthan, I know this seems crazy, but we have done crazier things. Trust me. You died twice on Draxus 9. Yeah, but I got better. Twice. That is a perfect record. Human logic is an oxymoron. The drop was everything I feared and worse. Screaming through the atmosphere in a metal coffin, watching the heat shields glow, wondering if the Kryn sensors would spot us. Praying to deities, I did not believe in that we would make it to the ground. We made it, all 50 pods. Perfect insertion. For a moment, I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, this mission would actually succeed. We landed in a forested area 20 kilometers from the target facility. The pods were camouflaged and abandoned. The team assembled quickly and efficiently, and within 10 minutes we were moving through the forest in complete silence. Captain Alvarez led the way, with Holloway's squad on point. I stayed in the middle of the formation, trying to keep up with humans who moved through rough terrain like it was a casual stroll. My species evolved on a lower gravity world. This planet was exhausting. We covered 15 kilometers in 4 hours. Not a word spoken. Just silent movement through hostile territory. I was impressed despite myself. When humans wanted to be quiet, they could be quieter than ghosts. Then we hit the first patrol. A Kryn scouting party, 12 soldiers walking right into our path. There was no time to hide, no time to evade. We were spotted immediately. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. The humans moved with such speed and coordination that I barely tracked it. Suppressed weapons, precise shots, and the entire Kryn patrol was down before they could transmit a warning. Clear, Holloway reported quietly. No alarm sent. We are still good. We continued moving. Stepping over Kryn bodies like this was routine. For these humans, it probably was. The facility came into view as the sun was setting. It was enormous, a sprawling complex of buildings and defensive structures covering several square kilometers. Walls, guard towers, sensor arrays, and enough soldiers to garrison a small city. We were supposed to sneak into that. Captain Alvarez called the team leaders together for a quick briefing. I listened in, recording everything. "We breached the perimeter here," she said, indicating a point on her tactical display. Weak spot in the sensor coverage. Once inside, we split into 3 teams. Alpha Team takes out the power station. Bravo Team secures the command center. Charlie Team, that is us, goes for the weapon itself and plants the charges. "What about extraction?" someone asked. Alvarez was quiet for a moment. "If we complete the mission, extraction teams will be waiting at these coordinates. If we do not complete the mission, extraction does not matter because we will all be dead along with everyone else when that weapon activates." The humans nodded like this was perfectly reasonable planning. The infiltration began at midnight. Using equipment I did not fully understand, the humans cut through the perimeter fence without triggering the sensors. We slipped inside, moving between patrol routes, avoiding guard posts, 50 people sneaking through one of the most secure facilities in the sector. It worked for exactly 20 minutes. Then someone spotted us. A Kryn guard on a routine check, right place at the wrong time. He saw us, reached for his comm, and died before he could transmit, but the damage was done. His missed check-in would trigger an alarm within minutes. "Double time," Alvarez ordered. "We have maybe 5 minutes before this place locks down." We ran. So much for stealth. The teams split up, racing for their objectives, trying to complete the mission before the entire facility came down on our heads. Holloway's squad, my assigned unit, was part of Charlie Team heading for the weapon facility. We sprinted through corridors, past storage areas, taking down scattered Kryn soldiers who were still confused about what was happening. Then the alarms went off. Every light in the facility turned red. The last doors started closing. We heard the sounds of Kryn forces mobilizing throughout the complex. "Faster," Holloway urged. "We need to reach the weapon bay before they seal it." We made it with seconds to spare, sliding under a descending blast door that would have cut us in half. On the other side was a massive chamber, and in the center of it was the weapon. I recognized the design immediately. A planet cracker. A device that could destabilize a world's core and tear it apart from the inside. If the Kryn completed this, they could destroy entire systems. "Plant the charges," Captain Alvarez ordered. "We have maybe 10 minutes before the Kryn breach this chamber." The demolition specialist, a quiet human named Park, went to work setting explosive charges around the weapon's power core. The rest of us set up defensive positions at the entrances, preparing for the inevitable assault. It came faster than expected. Kryn soldiers poured through every access point, and suddenly we were in a firefight in close quarters. The humans held their positions, their training and experience showing as they methodically cut down attackers. I crouched behind a console, recording everything, watching humans fight with a precision that contradicted their reputation for chaos. They covered each other, called out targets, moved like parts of a single organism. Holloway was everywhere, directing fire, filling gaps in the defense, somehow keeping track of everything happening at once. I understood why his squad followed him. He led from the front, took the same risks he asked of them, and never asked them to do anything he would not do himself. "Charges set," Park called out. 5-minute timer. "We need to leave now." "All back," Alvarez ordered. "Controlled retreat to the extraction point." We ran again, fighting as we went. The Kryn were everywhere now, the entire facility mobilized. We took casualties. 3 humans fell in the first corridor, 2 more at a checkpoint. The team was bleeding, but we kept moving. We emerged into the main courtyard, between us and the perimeter fence where we entered. Between us and escape. Except now there were approximately 200 Kryn soldiers between us and freedom. "Oh, that is not good," someone muttered. "Alternate route?" Holloway asked. "No time," Alvarez replied, checking her tactical display. "We have 3 minutes before those charges blow, and we are still inside the blast radius." "So we go through them," Holloway said. "Like this was obvious." "Through 200 soldiers?" I could not help but interject. "That is impossible." Holloway looked at me, and he was smiling. Actually smiling. "You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means." Then he charged. Just started running directly at 200 enemy soldiers, firing as he went. His squad, because they were all apparently insane, charged with him. The rest of the strike team had maybe 2 seconds to decide. Follow the crazy humans or stay behind and die when the facility exploded. It was not really a choice. We all charged. What followed was less a battle and more controlled chaos. The humans hit the Kryn line like a hammer, not trying to fight everyone, just punching through, creating a gap. We took casualties. More humans fell. But the momentum carried us forward, through the Kryn formation, towards the perimeter. I ran in the middle of it all, my recording equipment clutched to my chest, watching humans die to buy seconds for the rest of us to escape. They did not hesitate, did not question, just fought and died so others could live. We hit the perimeter fence. Some humans went over, some went through, some just blasted holes and ran. The Kryn were right behind us, firing, pursuing, and somewhere behind us that weapon facility was about to explode. "Run," Alvarez was shouting. "Just run." We ran. Through the forest, away from the facility, as fast as our legs could carry us. I lost count of how many were still with us, just focused on running, on escaping, on surviving the next few seconds. The explosion, when it came, was everything we hoped for and more. The weapon detonated, taking the entire facility with it. The shock wave knocked us down, sent trees flying, turned night into day for a brief, terrible moment. I lay on the ground, my audio sensors ringing, my visual inputs filled with white light, wondering if I was dead. Then I heard voices, human voices, counting off, checking in, confirming who was still alive. We had lost 23 people, 23 humans who would never go home. But 27 of us survived, including Holloway, Alvarez, and by some miracle myself. The extraction took 2 hours. Human ships swooped in under cover of the confusion, picked us up, and jumped to hyperspace before the Kryn could organize a response. We had done it. Completed the mission. Destroyed the weapon. Survived. In the transport back to Pinnacle Point, I sat next to Holloway. He was bandaged again, had taken shrapnel from the explosion, but was alive and already making plans for the next mission. "That was the most insane thing I have ever witnessed," I told him. "That was Tuesday," he replied. "Wait until you see what we do when things get really difficult." I looked at this human, this impossible creature who had been shot, burned, blown up multiple times, and kept coming back for more. I thought about all the humans I had watched, their stubbornness and courage and absolute refusal to accept defeat. "Holloway," I said carefully, "why do you keep doing this? You could request safer assignments. You have more than earned it." He was quiet for a moment, looking at the surviving members of his squad. "Because someone has to," he said finally. "Because if people like us do not stand up and fight, then who will? Because every mission we complete, every weapon we destroy, every battle we win means someone back home gets to live in peace for another day, even if it kills you, especially if it kills me." He looked at me directly. "That is the deal, Vorthen. That is what soldiers do. We go into the dark places so others do not have to. We face the impossible so everyone else can sleep safely. And yeah, A lot of us do not come back. But the ones who do, we make sure their sacrifice meant something. I had no response to that. What could I say? This was what humans were. Not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the longest lived, but the most determined, the most stubborn. The ones who would stare down impossible odds and charge anyway because someone had to. We returned to Pinnacle Point to a hero's welcome. Command was ecstatic. The mission had succeeded beyond expectations. The Kryn superweapon was destroyed, their plans in shambles. The war effort had been given new life. Holloway and his squad were decorated, given medals for valor, and immediately assigned to the next impossible mission, because apparently success is rewarded with more chances to die horribly. I submitted my report to the Galactic Council. It was substantially different from my earlier observations. I wrote about human capability, their tactics and technology. But mostly I wrote about their character, their willingness to sacrifice, their refusal to quit, their absolute certainty that even when facing impossible odds, they could still make a difference. The Council's response surprised me. They wanted more observations, wanted me to continue documenting human military operations. They were beginning to understand, as I had, that humans were unlike any species they had encountered before. I accepted the assignment, of course. Someone had to document these insane mammals. Might as well be me. Besides, I had grown attached to Holloway and his squad. Pack bonding, humans called it. Apparently it was contagious. 3 weeks later, I was back on Pinnacle Point, preparing for another deployment. I found Holloway in the same training bay, running the same drills, preparing for the next mission. Observer Vorthen, he greeted me with genuine warmth. Back for more? Apparently I have not learned my lesson about staying away from humans who get shot repeatedly. And he laughed. Come on, we are shipping out in 4 hours. Captain Alvarez has a new mission. Something about infiltrating a Kryn command station. That sounds suicidal. Yeah, probably. But someone has to do it. I followed him, recording equipment ready, preparing to document whatever madness humans would unleash next. I had started this assignment thinking I would observe a new species in combat. Instead, I had found something far more valuable. I had found the answer to a question the Galactic Council had been asking for years. What makes a species truly dangerous? What makes them a threat or an ally worth having? It was not technology. It was not numbers. It was not even raw physical capability. It was will. It was determination. It was the absolute refusal to give up even when every logical calculation said defeat was certain. Humans had that in abundance. They would fight impossible battles, take impossible casualties, and somehow impossibly find a way to win. Not because they were invincible, but because they simply refused to accept that they could lose. Holloway had been shot, burned, and buried. By all rights, he should be dead several times over. But he kept coming back, kept fighting, kept leading his soldiers into the darkness because that was what needed to be done. And he was not unique. There were thousands like him, millions across human space, all of them carrying that same stubborn spark, that same determination to fight for what they believed in no matter the cost. The Kryn Dominion had made a mistake when they started this war. They had assumed humans were just another species to be conquered. They had not understood what they were facing, not until it was too late. Because humans did not fight wars to win territory or resources, they fought to survive. And a species fighting for survival was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. I watched Holloway prepare for the next mission, joking with his squad, checking his equipment, ready to charge into danger once again. And I realized something that both terrified and inspired me. Humanity had not even begun to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. What I had witnessed, all the impossible feats and stubborn victories, that was just the beginning. Humans were still learning how to wage war on a galactic scale, still figuring out their place among the stars. What would they be capable of in 10 years? 100? When they truly understood their own potential? The galaxy was going to find out. and I would be there to document it all. Ready, observer? Holloway asked, interrupting my thoughts. I checked my recording equipment one last time, as ready as anyone can be when following humans into certain doom. He grinned. That is the spirit. Come on, let us go make history. We loaded onto the transport, joining the rest of the strike team. Another mission. Another impossible task. Another chance for humans to demonstrate that impossible just meant it had not been done yet. As we lifted off from Pinnacle Point, heading for whatever fresh madness awaited us, I transmitted one final message to the Galactic Council. It was short, direct, and summarized everything I had learned about humanity in the simplest terms possible. Recommendation: do not fight the humans. Befriend them. Because if they are on your side, you will win. And if they are against you, you have already lost. You just do not know it yet. Holloway caught me sending the transmission. What was that about? He's just updating my superiors on human capabilities. What did you tell them? I considered my answer carefully. I told them the truth. That you are all completely insane and we should be very grateful you are on our side. He laughed, and the rest of the squad joined in. They thought I was joking. I was not. Not even a little bit. But that was fine. Let them laugh. Let them joke. Let them face the universe with that peculiar human confidence that bordered on madness but was backed by courage I had never seen in any species. Because somewhere out there, the enemies of the Galactic Council were making plans, building weapons, preparing for war, and they had no idea what was coming for them. Sergeant Jake Holloway and thousands like him who had been shot and burned and buried and blown up and who kept getting back up. Who kept fighting. Who kept winning. The galaxy was going to learn what I had learned. What the Kryn had learned too late. That when you kill a human, when you think you have finally stopped them, when you bury them and move on, you should probably check twice. Because chances are they will report for duty anyway. And then you are in real trouble.